In today's video, we're going to talk about US-led democracy. Oh, I love to talk about democracy. I will see it as an extension of my previous video right here, about financial colonialism. So if you guys haven't watched that one, I highly recommend it. I am going to bring back Professor Zhang again from China now. Actually, this video, I think many of my Chinese audience actually watch it before in Chinese. But I'm gonna show you. It is quite an interesting video because Professor Zhang talked about Western democracy several times, and I think this video make most sense to me. Chinese government has a lot of propaganda, definitely, and you can consider this video to be propaganda as well, but propaganda does not mean that it's wrong or lie. It's just bias, all right? And Chinese government is not really looking to actively charge its population with political ideology when it comes to international relationships. So the Chinese state media is not bombarding its population with political hatreds or towards outside world. They prefer people to just look the other way and live their life. It's unlike the US system, which US media here try to get people to look at things in another country a certain way in order to get the vote. But Chinese people or Chinese government don't really do that. Of course, though, there's 1.4 billion Chinese. There are individuals that looks for more geopolitical contents. So China Now is a show for that, okay? What China Now is, from my perspective, is the formal government recognized, you can call propaganda on geopolitical issues, that is trying to pretend it is not government, okay? An official narrative delivered in an unofficial way is extremely unlikely to hear something that displeases the Chinese government on the show. Maybe sometimes there are guest speakers that might make mistake, I would say, and that part will get cut out if it is too serious. So I just want my audience to know that this is the Chinese government narrative, what they want to show, and it's for domestic consumption, all right? Even says here on YouTube channel that this is a Chinese government funded channel. So today we're going to take a look at how Chinese government want its domestic audience to see what Western democracy is, all right? I will give you an untainted version of this Chinese so-called propaganda. Let's go. Today's so-called Western-style democracy is what I will call some form of procedure democracy and representative democracy. I think today, the Western-style democracy is entering a phase of decline. And many people in the West are starting to doubt and reflect on this current style of democracy, questioning if it is the best or only logical way forward. There's a survey done in the US back in 2023. 71% of the Americans believe US is heading down the wrong path. Well, I have no idea which survey he's referring to, but I found this, okay? As you can see here, record low in US satisfied with way democracy is working. This is published in January 5th, 2024, this year. And you can see the highlight here, all right? 28% are satisfied, down from prior low of 35%. And only 38% of Democrats and only 17% of Republicans are satisfied, all right? Let's go forward with his speech here. In fact, let me tell you guys a bit of history about democracy. Oh, this Chinese guy is trying to teach us about democracy, huh? Okay, let's see what he has to say. Today, many parts of the world see this procedure democracy or representative democracy as equal to democracy. And other form of governance is not democracy. That's what we are taught, right? But the history of this type of democracy is not that long. According to Western intellectuals, today's democracy is not the classical democracy of people running the country, which is impossible to actually apply in reality. Rather, what we have in the West is population decide which elite to run the country. So there's a different options of leaders, and we decide which leader to follow. This type of democracy was quickly adapted by many countries and were spread around the world. So my audience need to know, this kind of so-called democracy is not common just a few decades ago, and were common, widely praised and promoted only recently. Now, this is the interesting and controversial part. And please, my audience, I'm asking for your feedback on this. And put some thoughts to it before you give me feedback, okay? It's not me trying to stuff you with narrative or propaganda down your throat. I'm humbly asking for your input. And I'm serious, okay? Not joking. Why this kind of so-called democracy has been widely accepted by Western elites? My explanation is that Western countries' capitalist elites discovered a secret. These Western wealthy elites found that the process of procedure democracy, the process of selecting a leader for a country, can be controlled by capital. I need my audience to digest this, okay? In reality, Western wealthy elites have early on achieved dominance over mainstream media and civil power. Because of this dominance over media and civil entities, wealthy elites can put heavy influence over elections, altering the result. So no matter who gets elected, the interests of the wealthy elites are always protected. Of course, media is not the only tool, but it's one of the major tools. Okay. Now, according to MRC Business released an article confirming that wealthy elites have heavy influence over the control of media. I'm going to link the report in this description. This report says this, okay? The financial crocodile, George Soros, spent $32 billion on promoting his project, the Open Society Foundation. And he directly funded over 54 influential mainstream media news anchors, including CNN, NBC, CBS, and Washington Post. So according to the report, George Soros has direct influence over media regarding what to report and what not to report. So the principle of so-called US democracy is based on the foundation of a free media and a fair media that doesn't really exist anymore. Now, what he said is a bit offensive here to the Americans, all right? But I'm going to translate it because I want my channel to be not a sugarcoat version of Chinese narrative, because this is what domestic audience is consuming in China, okay? After all, the United States is a country established primarily by capital-driven motivations, by capitalists, and belong to capitalists, and do not belong to all Americans. Now, this is the part I'm not so sure. I guess what he means is that the formation of US is by British colonies, right? So grab land from the native, is that considered capitalist driven? And when US declare its independence, is it because US believe that it is getting taxed by British too much and believe it is better to just leave the British Commonwealth and start its own? Less money paid to the crown, is that what it is? Is that the primary reason? If so, then that's also a capital-driven motivation. I guess that's what he means. Right, let's continue. This is one of the primary reasons that 1% of US elites own 50% of the wealth of US. This is why today's United States has extreme income inequality and mainstream media losing the trust of the people. Media serve the interests of the wealthy, push forward risky business model, causing the 2008 financial crisis. This financial crisis massively reduced the middle class wealth in the United States. If you put inflation into account, today's US household median income still have not recovered to the level of 2007. I'm not sure about that. Maybe you guys can comment on it. Now, let's go to the international part. US wealthy elites, or you can call them now the globalist elite. These people try to sell American-style democracy around the world. But the true reason they do that is because it is to maximize self-interest. Nothing wrong with that. I guess that's being capitalist, right? All those proxy wars, regime change, color revolution, causing massive problems around the world and refugee crisis, we come to call America the root of chaos. Root of chaos. You know how Americans are calling Russia, China, Iran the new axis of evil? This is like a new Marvel movie or something, axis of evil versus the root of chaos. I need to license this shit. The George Soros Foundation. Well, he keep talking about George Soros. He has this hyper focus on George Soros. I have a feeling, just a feeling, okay, that George Soros is not very famous in US, but it's very well known in Asia. And for Europe, I'm not too sure. I think Europeans are more concerned with Klaus Schwab and WEF, the World Economic Forums. However, Klaus Schwab is not so well known in Asia, I would say. So if Klaus Schwab is the boogeyman of Europe, then yeah, George Soros is the boogeyman of Asia. I'm not sure about South America, Africa, Middle East. Who's your boogeyman? You can tell me, okay? But let's continue. George Soros and elites ignore the protests and frustration of American citizens and continue to promote and expand democracy around the world. Okay, I need to pause again so I don't confuse my audience here. The reason why Professor Zhang keep mentioning this George Soros is in his mind, I guess. What he mean is this, okay? Capital control media. Media controls the narrative. The narrative then controls the population, democracy, and democracy picks the leader. So ultimately, if you trace to the root, is capital who's like running the country. So what he's saying is that leader runs the country. Leader runs the country for who? Well, not for the people, but for capital, all right? For George Soros and the bankers and the central banks and those who control the money supplies. That's what he's referring to. So at the end, it is the people who control the capital who's running the Western democracy. And he's just using George Soros as a figurehead. Now, whether you agree with him or not, this is what the Chinese government is broadcasting. I think this is more thoughtful than those CNN garbage you get here in the US, don't you think? But let's continue. George Soros creating and funding all kinds of NGO and think tanks, sugarcoating the global elite's greed with slogans like democracy, freedom, transparency, and so on. Conduct massive amount of cultural brainwash. The primary goal is to take control of a political system of the target country and rob the wealth of the target nation. Rob the wealth of a target nation. That is a bit extreme, but it depends, okay? Let's put it this way. If you are friendly to US, you can call it a form of tax, I guess. I mean, if you consider US as a mafia, you can have a friendly mafia godfather as a friend too, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Just pay him some tribute from time to time. But if you are consider US neutral, you might call it US is harvesting you from time to time. Now, if you are hostile to US, yes, you can say United States is trying to rob you. So you can see today's China is becoming more and more hostile to US. So it's calling this action robbing, actually. Since I'm an individual living in US, I like to use a more friendly term. Let me think. Redistributing the wealth of nations to maintain the harmony of this pyramid system. This is how I would like to put it. Now, he made a statement which I consider to be the most important statement of this video. And I can actually make several videos regarding this. This is what he said. If a country does not have a political entity that represents the interests of the entire population to run this so-called democracy, the most likely outcome is that the power of the capitalists will take over. And for a country anywhere around the planet, if they do not have a political power core that serves the interests of its own people, then a capital-driven entity will take over its democracy, or so-called government, and run it instead. And this capital elite force are often Western-based or US dollar-based, what we can call today the globalist elite, because they are the richest, okay? And this is very interesting because I want to make a future video on this, that smaller countries in, let's say, Eastern Europe, who's using euro and not their own currency, it is very difficult for them to have a political core that's loyal to its own people. Because their elites, their wealth is anchored and bind to another currency, which is not in their control, euro, for example. This is something people really need to think about and digest, okay? It's very philosophical, not easy to understand, I would say. Because back in the old days, storage of wealth is usually things like gold, and that's something neutral. But today, the storage of wealth is in fiat currency. And if you are not loyal to the globalist elite, they can freeze your assets. So this control of money supply and the channel of money flow, and ultimately the weaponization of the instrument of wealth, it forces compliance and obedience. See if you guys agree to what I just said, okay? It takes time to get your head around. Because I want to argue against many of my European friends, especially my Finnish friends, that this globalist capitalist elite actually anchor onto the power of US dollar, that, or euros, depending on how you see euro, that has taken over the political system, all right? And I spent hundreds of hours trying to explain what I mean to them, how I see it. I'm obviously not a Finn myself, but just happen to know and play around with their politics a little bit. Let me give you guys an example, okay? Now this guy, Alexander Stubb, he was the Prime Minister of Finland between 2014 and 2015, not even a year. And he resigned, and all the Finns that I talk to hates him. Nobody likes him. And he was, before becoming Prime Minister, he got a lot of other very interesting position. Okay, he was Minister of European Affairs and Foreign Trade, and then there's the Minister of Foreign Affairs in the European Parliament back in 2004, 20 years ago, when he was only 35, 36 years old. 35, 36 years old, he was the Minister for Foreign Affairs in European Parliament. And he was also here, it says here, he was in European Parliament of Intergroup on LGBTQ rights. Is he a gay, or I have no idea. He's also very anti-Russia. he became the president of Finland in 2024, just a few months ago. And in the election, it's also very suspicious. Okay, he won the primary by 27%, and in the second round he got just 51%, so barely a victory. He also have a YouTube channel here you can watch, STG series, STG. You know, the name is suspicious. It's called, I think, EU Institute School of Transnational Governance. Isn't that a very suspicious name? Transnational governance. And he went to all kind of different panels in Davos, World Economic Forum, speaking for different hosts and stuff. Look at this video I'm about to show you.
And there are those people who want to end the conflict, and of course, all of us do. But the question is on what terms. So, for instance, I was in a panel just a few minutes ago with Tony Blair, and we discussed a possible solution to the conflict. And in my mind, it's simply to go back to the borders of 1991, because if you allow of Ukraine, because if you allowed any leeway for Putin, he will just think that he can continue to do what he does. Is there a solution to the conflict here at the World Economic Forum? My direct answer to you is no, there is not. And I don't see an end to the conflict anytime soon.
So a discussion with Tony Blair, that's one of the biggest war criminal, right? On how to stop a war. And the conclusion is not to stop it, because it's asking Russia to return to a 1991 border, which is, I'm not sure how feasible that is today. And during this time, Sara Marie was the Prime Minister of Finland. And this is the lady here. And she's even younger than I am, okay? When I was talking to my Finnish friend, I was like, do you guys even understand how power works? The only way that such a young person can command any form of power, to hold any kind of leverage, to claim to power in any form of way, even democracy, is by, I would say, a revolution, like this guy from Burkina Faso. If you keep seeing this kind of random young men or young women, pretty handsome face that has barely any inherited impact or fame in his country, and all this capital control driven mainstream media start to promote them and sugarcoat him or her, they are not real leaders, I would say. They're like puppets. They serve entirely for whoever funded them, okay? I tried to explain this structure to them, this power structure. And only a few Finnish friends of mine start to understand what I'm trying to say. Now I'm gonna show you guys a news article here, okay? This is back in 2019. It says here, Finland is winning the war on fake news. What is learning may be crucial to Western democracy, okay? And in some of the article we see here, it even talk about, and I'm not kidding, Finnish government hiring US CIA officers to teach their education bodies how to identify fake news. Hire CIA to teach. Can you believe that? And look here, this graph. Look at this. And I shared this graph with my friend and we were laughing and discussing about this. It says here, out of all these European countries, you see how Finland rank number 1 when it comes to, it's media literacy across Europe. And Finland ranked first out of 35 countries in a study measuring resilience to the post-truth phenomenon, so against fake news. I mean, you can literally look at this list and roughly say that, is this some kind of how brainwashed some of these countries are, according to CIA? So Finland is 76% brainwashed. You have 24% more to go. You can see roughly not entirely, all right? The higher you go in the list, the more anti-Russia or anti-Putin you are. Seriously, if you look at the list down there, you have, Hungary, Greece, Serbia, Turkey. Those are, okay with Russia. And up there, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, those really hate Russia, right? So I was joking to my friend, did George Soros make the list? I'm not sure. Are they going to hand out some kind of trophy for topping the list? And I really remember, okay, I shared this and discussed with my friend, and I left for a couple of hours. That was last year, and I went and do some errands. I come back and I try to finish reading the article, right? And then I found out, and I'm not kidding. Look at this. The source of this CNN article is published by European Policy Initiative, Open Society Institution. Open Society Institution that's funded by George Soros. I was like, dude.
Ooh, that's a bingo.
Is that the way you say it? That's a bingo.
You just say bingo. Bingo! How fun!
Bingo! And to make this entire joke even better, after just 1 week of me discussing this article with my Finnish friends, and most of them, I would say that they don't understand what I'm talking about. Some of them get a bit suspicious, but most of them don't, okay? And then just after 1 week, the Prime Minister, Sanna Marin, resigned from the position and joins the Tony Blair Institute. And I was like, dude, can you guys see it? Your country has been literally colonized in front of your eyes. Well, I would say that a few of them come to understand what I'm trying to say, but most of my Finnish friends still couldn't see. And that was quite shocking to me because let me try to conjure up some kind of metaphor here. Okay, it's like the president of Mexico, Andres, here, all right, resign from president and join the Colombian Medellin cartel. And then you have a bunch of Finnish friends of mine saying that, no, I don't see any relationship of how he has anything to do with the cocaine business. No relationship. So it is quite shocking just how unable some of the people connect these dots. And I think it's pretty obvious, but they don't see anything. Which I don't know. Please tell me what you think, all right? Initially, I want to talk more about, US election, the deep state, how it influenced the US elections and bills passed in Congress. But yeah, that's going to be too long and a bit risky for me to say here in my channel. So I'm going to skip to the end and draw my conclusion right now. I think the principal argument when it comes to democracy between me and any of my audience, so I think we need to come to some kind of a agreement here, is that the definition between what democracy is supposed to be is different from what today's democracy actually is. It's two different things. So when people always try to defend democracy, they often give democracy this textbook definition, which is in reality different from how democracy actually works, all right? So for us to come to some kind of agreement, we have to agree on one basic principle. Democracy is a tool, all right? There's nothing magical, majestic, or divine about it. This is very important for everyone, especially those who is treating democracy as some kind of sacred religion, cult. They need to drop that mindset, all right? So I want to come clean, all right? We in China, we do not have democracy, or not the Western style democracy. So we have Xi Jinping. So what is Xi Jinping? Is it 8 out of 10? Maybe 5 out of 10? Some Chinese don't like him. Maybe it's a 2 out of 10. And well, it is what it is. All right. Well, there's only two ways down the road. Either he talked to himself and say that, I'm not good at this job. I would just quit and give my job to another person and let someone else lead China. Or if he's not willing to, for people who are unsatisfied with him, we can wait for him to get old and eventually he'll pass away and someone else take the job. Chinese don't have illusion about what this is, okay? So we do not have people coming up and saying that, well, our country sucks and this and that. But you know what? We have Xi Jinping, the supreme leader, okay? You don't have Xi Jinping. You will never find Chinese people who say this kind of thing. So we're more practical, realistic. But I do run into a lot of people in the West, whether it's real life friends or, you know, people in the comment section, and just come in and start talking about democracy, and that's it. Our country sucks, but we have democracy, you don't. Or some freedom of speech. It's not even, it's, you know, even the freedom of speech and travel things are getting restricted now. So maybe the West is becoming more like China. We're going around like a full circle. So to me, for democracy to really work, it requires just too many preconditions for it to work properly, okay? For countries, because of certain elements like geography, for example, it is almost impossible for it to work as intended. And this is something that I think I will talk about in my future video. So I want to conclude by going back to this point, okay? Capital control media, a few corporation, you know, buying up the entire media space, including YouTube, and George Soros funding all those TV anchors. I wonder if they fund someone like Peter Zion or some other anti-Russia, anti-China channels, you know? It's possible, right? And then these media shape the narrative, showing you what they want you to know and not showing you what they don't want you to know, okay? They don't have to even lie that much. If there's something that is not in their interest, they just don't show you and don't tell you. And those things will be considered conspiracy, right? There's no proof because all the media don't show you any information about that. That must be wrong, right? And so after that, that narrative act like a shepherd, right? For the people to guide them towards the right democracy. This is the funny part. Many people really believe that they have independent thinking, but to really be able to think independently and start to build your own geopolitical understanding and on politics, you have to spend a lot of time and effort, all right? And you need to have a very inclusive attitude. And most people just do not have the interest and time to do it, right? So how do they decide their political alignment? Just maybe a couple of minutes of CNN news every day on average. That's it. And maybe not even that, to be honest. They just pick the guy or the girl who look best. I don't know. So those who vote in democracy, yes, you can say it represent majority, but does that even represent truth or wisdom? Because, you know, I mean, truth is whatever that CNN news tells you, right? Because the other things that they don't tell you is definitely wrong. So in comparison, we are basically just like a bunch of sheep being shepherded down the road. And the media is like those golden retrievers, right? Those shepherd dogs to guide us towards the correct direction. And then at the end, this decision, democracy, picks the leader. And the leader is probably, you know, prepared for us ahead of time by those who controls the capital. And those leaders who are not in control of capital, they will be considered far right, you know, extremists, or they sexually harassed a woman 40 years ago or something like that. So at the end, what you get is capital-driven entity pre-select your leader and do their bidding. And if you don't like them, you can elect them out of office, but they will just prepare and install another puppet into office for you. So I know there's people that keep mentioning that no matter who you elect to, it's always the same, you know, crap, and you cannot get out of this cycle. That's what is going on right now. But at the end, I want to make a point to my, you know, democracy-loving audience, I would say today's Western democracy come down to just two main themes, all right? One is the perception or illusion of democracy, that you are in some kind of control. In reality, you don't have that much control, to be honest. But the second thing is more important, okay? Ultimately, what drives your support for this so-called democracy is the standard of living. If you have good purchasing power, you have a comfortable life, you are free to travel around, then you're fine. At the end, that's what matters, right? Like my Eastern European friends, if you guys escaped from the Soviet Union and your life became much worse than when you were in the Soviet, will you be still praising democracy everywhere? You won't, right? That's why many of the countries around the world, they do not carry this kind of crusade spirit towards democracy. They are at the bottom of the pyramid system. That financial colonial system that I explained in my other video. And often this liberal democracy has been used as a tool, an instrument to, let's say, invade those countries' political sovereignty space and alter their decision-making body in favor of the foreign capitalist regime at the end. And this is very, very important for every one of my friend audience to know. It doesn't matter where you're from, but given the circumstances, especially in Eastern Europe today, if you accept this is roughly what is happening, okay, what I just said in the past 30 minutes, you have to figure out that the capital that's sitting on top of that pyramid, is that capital domestic or foreign? And this might not seem too important in reality if we are in some kind of a peaceful unipolar world, but we are no longer in a peaceful unipolar world. We are in this multipolar world, or I want to say that we're in some kind of unipolar world rebellion. If you have a leadership that's loyal to its own people, okay, with or without the support of capital, when dramatic events take place, okay, its leader need to seek the best interest of its own people and to make decisions in favor of its own country. We can all agree to that, right? What you don't want is that capital, which is running your country, is foreign based. Now that's very dangerous. So you need to be able to tell whether that leader of yours is making the best decision for your country and not for, let's say, Brussels or Davos or Washington, Wall Street, BlackRock, or George Soros, for example, because those people aim to maintain their position and come out on top of this turbulence era, all right? And you have to ask yourself a math question. If sacrificing Ukraine or Poland or Romania and Finland and Taiwan and Philippines, if sacrificing those few countries can give the ruling elite, let's say 40-50% chance of coming out on top after this turbulence era, will they to decide to go ahead and do it? So when those globalist elites decide to greenlight the operation, will the leader that runs your country be like, I'm not so sure. Maybe I would just sit back and, you can have Kazakhstan to go for it at Russia, or have Georgia to give another go. I'm just gonna sit back and do nothing and play stupid. Will that be your leader? Or will your leader say, just, yes, sir, yes, and start playing Fortunate Son on max volume or something? Now, to end this video, I want to make a final statement. how I see this Western liberal democracy driven by capital at its core, which is resting on top of a financial colonial system, and use this financial colonial system to balance its expansionist drive. I'm curious to know that when the financial colonial system start to collapse, when other countries start to detach itself from this pyramid system, can this liberal democracy governance system survive and continue to prosper? To make it more simple, can Americans actually vote itself out of this imperial colonial global empire project to prove that what I consider to be like a semi-fake democracy actually have a self-cleansing fail-safe mechanism that allow US to navigate itself and the world away from potential global destruction? Something to think about, huh? So that's today's video. If you enjoy it, remember to click like. I will see you in my next video.